It was inevitable. This is a video I didn't want to have to make. This is a video that I was dreading I would need to make. But now, after 7 weeks of football, it's time for the Chargers to make some major changes. And no, put your pitchforks down. I'm not talking about Joe Hortiz or Jim Harbaugh yet. But I do think that after a disastrous Week 7 loss, the Chargers have to make some major personnel changes, taking away the spots of some veteran presences like Bradley Bozeman and Bud Dupree, and opting for some of the younger talent. What's up, everyone? I'm Sam Peña, a Bolt fan in the Berg for Chargers Digest. This is a tough one for me. I really didn't want to have to talk about this, but that was just a disastrous performance that the Chargers had against the Colts. It seemed as if everything went from bad to worse. The vibes of this team right now are not great, and if the Chargers want to be able to be contenders later in the season, they have a lot of work ahead of them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that Week 7 loss to the Colts, talk about where the Chargers need to make changes to their personnel department, and what they can do to have a fighting chance on Thursday night against the Minnesota Vikings. So without further ado, let's talk about it. The first thing we have to talk about, obviously, is the offensive performance. Obviously, Herbert was under duress all game. Once again, that's nothing new. I probably should have known this was going to be a loss as soon as the game started, once I saw those ugly yellow jerseys on the field. Sorry, Chargers fans, those are ugly uniforms. I don't like them. Break it up at least with some blue socks. They didn't even do that. But yeah, it was a tough game to watch. Herbert threw for over 400 yards. He now leads the league in passing yards. And I hate that all the people in the national media are saying, oh, Herbert cost them the game with his 2 interceptions. Yes, Herbert threw a bad pick in the red zone, but once again, for the most part in this game, he was phenomenal. He put the team in a position where they could win the game, but the defense gave up 38 points, and that's really the big concern out of this game, is that this defense does not look like the defense that we thought it was going to be all season. They've been the worst defense in the league since Week 5. When you take a look right now at the numbers, the teams that have allowed the most points since Week 5 are the Bengals at 95, the Dolphins at 87, and in between those two are the Chargers at 92. We should not have a defense that is in the same bracket right now as the Bengals and the Dolphins, for goodness sakes. These are two of the worst defenses in the league, and yet that's how the Chargers are playing right now. And I know they face some good teams. They face the Commanders and they face the Colts, who both have good offenses, but still, a lot of this has been self-inflicted wounds right now by the Chargers. A big part of that is because of the injuries, and yet again, there's another injury with Tito Ogbonnia, a very good run defender, going on injured reserve, according to Daniel Popper. But for the most part, this team has been pretty healthy on the defensive side of the football. We still have our star in Derwin James. We still have Deion Henley. We just got Khalil Mack back, although he was limited in that first game back. This is a defense that should be performing at a higher level, but it's not. And I think a big part of that is because the Chargers made some poor decisions in the offseason, specifically not going more aggressively after Poona Ford. We had the cap space to give Poona whatever we wanted, and we didn't. Right now, he is the 5th best run defender amongst all defensive tackles in the league, and yet for some reason, we just decided to let that go by the wayside. I think when you take a look right now at the Chargers from a defensive position, Jesse Minter says that he has to take the blame on himself. Minter was quoted as saying, I would say we're not where we want to be for whatever reason. We're not getting the results we want each particular play, and I always look at myself first, always have, and always will. And this wasn't something that came out of nowhere. The Athletic's Daniel Popper pointed out in an article that he wrote earlier this week, and he also pointed out that the Chargers right now have been one of the worst defenses in the league, not just this year, but also from the past 2 years when you combine their performance last year under Jim Harbaugh. He pointed out that this was the worst defensive performance by adjusted points per play since during the Harbaugh tenure. That's worse than obviously that Tampa Bay game where they gave up 40 points and that Ravens game where they gave up 30 points. Now, of course, there have been some bright spots on this defense. In particular, Derek Tart has been someone who's been performing at a high level. He's currently the top 5 graded defensive tackle in the league, and he currently has 3 tackles for loss to go along with those 10 tackles and a quarterback hit. He's someone who was doing a good job of just kind of filling up the middle of that space. And that's really what I kind of want to talk about when it comes to the Chargers. When I say that the Chargers have to make changes, I'm not talking about the interior of this defensive line, which has been performing at a pretty solid rate. I'm talking about the edge play. Tuli Tuipulotu has been a very good pass rusher, but he's regressed as a run defender. We traded for Odafe Owe, who has gotten after the quarterback, but has not been a good run defender, and we knew he would not be a good run defender. No, I'm talking about Bud Dupree. This is someone who the Chargers decided to re-sign, even though they chose not to re-sign Poona Ford in the offseason. And it's just a mind-boggling decision to me that that's the player who decided to re-sign this offseason when he's someone who only has 9 pressures in 7 games this year. He's averaging less than a pressure per game. Bud Dupree is someone who's at the twilight of his career, and yet he is still getting a decent amount of playing time. He has the 44th most snaps amongst edge rushers so far this season. Bud Dupree should not be getting that playing time, but for whatever reason, he's beloved by Joe Hortiz and Jim Harbaugh. And this is really frustrating for me because Harbaugh has frequently preached about how if you produce, you will earn your place on this team. But so far, Bud Dupree has not been producing, and he still has a place on this team. And it's not just Dupree, it's players along the offensive line as well. Once again, you take a look at the offensive line scores, there's some familiar names on here. Deculus, I have a hard time blaming because he was supposed to be a 5th string tackle, and yet now he's starting for the team. But Bradley Bozeman gave up another sack and 2 more pressures. Surprisingly, he was the Chargers' best pass blocker against the Colts, but he hasn't been that all year long for the team. Mekhi Becton had a 34 grade, the worst along the team. He was someone who the Chargers signed this offseason, and I like Becton, and I think he'll rebound at some point, but he's got to produce. And then you look at Foster Sarell and Zion Johnson, players who were first-round picks in the past. This just has to change. This is not acceptable when you're looking at an NFL football team. If they cannot protect Justin Herbert, this team isn't going to go anywhere. He's been hit 62 times this year, and he had over 50 dropbacks against the Colts because the team dug a hole for themselves so early on. This isn't sustainable offense. This is not sustainable NFL play. Looking forward to Thursday night against the Vikings. This is going to be a tough one because it's a short turnaround. Thursday Night Football, just 2 days away here. Fortunately, there is some good news coming out of this, though. Joe Alt, it looks like, has a chance to be able to play in this game. That would obviously be a huge boost for this offensive line. It would mean the Chargers would be able to switch back to what they were looking at as their starting offensive line after Rashawn Slater went down. Trey Pipkins, it looks like might be back this week as well. Pipkins isn't the best offensive lineman in the world, but he's better than Bobby Hart and Austin Deculus, which means the Chargers should be getting somewhat of an upgrade of this offensive line this week. Hopefully that'll be sustainable when it comes to the rest of the season, but Joe Alt's knee is going to be a concern just because high ankle sprains are injuries that can linger throughout the rest of the season. And I think the saddest thing out of this entire game was the fact that the Chargers wasted a gem of a performance by a young rookie. Oronde Gadsden broke out in a huge way this past week against the Colts. He had over 100 yards receiving. He was someone that Herbert was looking for early and often, and when he was, it was working. The Colts just had no answer for Gadsden. The linebackers were lost all day in coverage, and yes, that includes that last play on when the Chargers threw a pass to Lad McConkey, and it was broken up by Zaire Franklin, when in actuality he just committed pass interference. That was really frustrating to see. Regardless, though, that was a game the Chargers were going to lose anyway. Even if that had been caught for a touchdown, they still were going to have to stop the Colts and get the football back. The Chargers hadn't been able to stop the Colts all day. This is a frustrating game. This is a frustrating moment and a frustrating point in time for the Los Angeles Chargers. They have to make changes. I think they have to let go of Bud Dupree, they have to let go of Bradley Bozeman, and they have to bring in someone who can be at least replacement level value for this team. I've talked about in the past when it comes to trades for the Chargers, looking at players like Dylan Radunes, but I think the big thing for the Chargers is at the center position, they have to give Andre James a look. He's someone who has performed well in a Greg Roman-style offense in the past. At least give him a chance. We can't keep having Bradley Bozeman as the starting center. And the Chargers are going to have to pray that Khalil Mack can go 100% quickly, because right now there just isn't someone who can replace Bud Dupree on this roster at a replacement level. Although I do think they should have held on to Caleb Murphy because he's been a higher performer than Bud Dupree so far. Just decisions that really are not making sense that Joe Hortiz has made. Like I said, I'm not calling for this to be the end of the era yet. Obviously, the Chargers have made massive strides under Hortiz and Harbaugh, but this is disappointing to see. It's disappointing to see because we were promised something different. We were promised that this would be a football team that awards merit. And for some reason, this is a team that only seems to be rewarding years. That's not sustainable football. That's not good football. And that certainly is not going to be football that can get the Chargers a Super Bowl. Thank you all again so much for watching. I'm Sam Peña with Chargers Digest. Would really appreciate if you guys could like and subscribe. We're trying to build this channel here from the ground up. And as always, Bolt Nation, remember, Bolt up.